L'intervenant suivant, c'est donc, je ne sais pas comment est-ce qu'il faut dire.
And then the next speaker is the guru of social entrepreneurship in France, Jean-Marc Borello, who is the chairman of SOS Group. So I'll leave you the floor, Mr. Borello, to explain how you started off with this back in 1984. Well, I like sponsor better than guru, or godfather rather, because I'm from the south of France, and so I could be a mafia godfather actually. So I started off with this a very long time ago. You know, I was asked to tell you a little bit about my life and about SOS and about social enterprise and about economics. So I'll try to keep all this in the time, whatever little time I have. I'm an educator. I became an educator for underage criminals in 1977, and then I worked in with a certain number of ministries, Pierre Bérégovoy, Gaston Defferre, and Laurent Fabius, the ministries of justice. And then I left the civil service in 1987. So I was a civil servant for 10 years. That was my goal, and then I went to manage private companies, which had nothing to do with all that. I was the boss of an SME group that managed restaurants, discos, hotels. Fun life for 10 years. Good profit, good money, no qualms, fun. And then, on top of that, or in parallel with that, on October 4th, 1984, so it's almost going to be 30 years, we created the first branch of SOS, which was called SOS Drogue International at the time, to deal with drug addicts. So I had a passion for the general interest. This is why I became a civil servant at the age of 20. Then I had a passion for companies. This is why I left the civil service when I was 30. And then I thought that the place where the general interest best met inventivity and creativity and the spirit of enterprise of a company was social enterprise. So much so that after 15 years being the volunteer chairman of SOS, I started actually taking over this full-time 15 years ago. So basically, the SOS group was applying the practices of privately owned company for the benefit of civil society. And that's what I'm going to continue doing for a few years. Now, October 4th, 1984, SOS was an association that was involved with the drug addicts. So, you know, I had been in charge of that when I was working at the ministry for a few years, and I found that there was a lack of involvement with drug addicts at the time in France. I met Professor Claude Olivenstein. I thought he was a great guy, and together we decided to create SOS Drogue, a series of rehab centers. And so that was the beginning of SOS. And then, 30 years later, we have 40 association members, 15 companies, 2 cooperatives, and an interest economic group. So it's this big thing now, SOS, because there are 11,000 employees working for SOS. And we are involved in a whole array of sectors. You know, basically, we manage daycare centers and hospitals with palliative care. We manage a certain number of retirement homes. One of them is in Le Havre, by the way, as you enter the city. And so basically, if the person is willing, we are willing to be with them throughout their lives, from the cradle to the, you know what. So this SOS is actually a real company. We have 30 or 40 different businesses, basically. We work in health, drug addiction. That was our first core business, if you wish. But we also are involved with HIV patients, you know, because that's about the time that we created the company. When AIDS also came out, we managed 10 hospitals. We managed 60 retirement homes. We manage integration companies, catering companies, construction companies, fair trade stores, shops. We manage daycare centers for children, social and legal protection. Also, we work with the Ministry of Justice. So we are this big shopping list, if you wish, of everything that has to do with human beings. And I think that our idea has evolved throughout the years. I would say probably halfway through, because for the first 15 years, we thought that we were a structure that wanted to fight against exclusion, but in order to do this, we had to wait until the people had been excluded, and once they'd been kicked off the system, we had to bring them back in. And so the more we worked, the more excluded the people there were, and then people were even more and more excluded, more and more remote from the job market, more and more remote from society. And so we thought that probably, at the time, we thought that the idea was to create a system that would be non-exclusive. And maybe that's our story at SOS. This was also the beginning of social entrepreneurship. At the beginning, we said that fighting against exclusion means creating wealth and distributing it differently. So our specificity is that we have a holding company, which is an associative one. So what was created for the past 30 years belonged to no one. The buildings belong to no one, the companies, the hospitals belong to no one. There are no shareholders to the SOS group. We decided to minimize the salary gap. That's something that I submitted to the board a few years ago. So the maximum ratio is 1 to 10. Maybe one day it will be 1 to 15, but anyway, it has to remain within these limits. And we constantly try to assess our social impact, our economic impact, and our environmental impact, which means that we are probably not very good on each of these topics. But not very good, that's fine, because we want to have all three topics balanced. The objective is not to win a lot of money, but of course we can't afford to lose money. We have about 600 million euros in turnover today. So it means that we have to have our accounts more or less balanced. If we want to invest, if we want to grow, we need to have a little bit of profit, right? We have a social impact, which is as good as can be. But just because we are working in the social environment, it doesn't mean that we don't treat our employees correctly. We know that the associative world is not always an example to follow in terms of HR. So it takes a bit of an effort. And then our environmental impact, of course, it has to be measured. If we want to leave the world in not too bad a state for the future generations. So these are the three topics which a social enterprise has to focus on. This is what led us to participate and led me to accept to chair the movement of social entrepreneurs that was created a few years ago. You had the current chairman with you this morning, André Dupont. Now, social economy, working for solidarity, it was the bylaws that gave you some virtue. If you were an association, a cooperative, a mutual company, or a foundation, you were probably on the good side. And if you were a limited liability company or a major company or a multinational company, well, then you had to be on the bad side. Capitalists who feasted on the blood of poor workers, etc. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. We all know wonderful cooperatives such as Spangero, for example. We all know some organizations whose only aim is profit. We know some mutual companies which have disappeared because they were not so well managed. So actually, your legal status does not give you any virtue. And just because you are an association, it doesn't mean that you're good. And a certain number of companies, even big companies, are not trying to measure their social and environmental impact. And I hear a certain number of CEOs of CAC 40 companies. I hear them say a certain number of things that I would like to hear from associations, but it's not always the case. But basically, everything is not black or white. There is a law that will be presented to the Parliament in November, We have a minister for social economy, Benoît Hamon. We had to ask for this. We wanted this to depend on the finance ministry and not social affairs ministry, because social enterprises, it's a financial thing. And so we got Benoît Hamon, we got the ministry, and now this law is going to be passed by the members of parliament and by the senators. Well, of course, it's going to be amended, but basically it is going to give social entrepreneurship and social economics the legal grounds to grow. This sector is changing drastically. It was made up of a certain number of 50-something and even more than 50-something who were quite picturesque, self-learned, that is totally illiterate, and I'm one of them. If you think I'm picturesque, well, you should go and see the next one. So we had this, and actually now today, in that industry, our companies are full of people coming out of major business schools or polytechnic, even engineering schools, and they want to come and work with us, and they want to be in charge of our companies. And SOS was a little bit ahead of others. I knew that I knew nothing, and so right from the beginning, I recruited young people from the best business schools for all the supporting functions, finance, legal, HR, etc. So we were a little bit ahead of others on that. Now, today, our sector is really rejuvenated by those kids, once an educator, always an educator. So those kids or those young people are now going to rejuvenate the sector, to make it more professional, to make it grow much faster, and to go much farther. Because this is not a Franco-French thing only, which I find very reassuring. In the US, I met the advisors to President Obama. There are two of them working on social entrepreneurship in the White House. Today, the SOS Group advises the mayor of Seoul on how to improve solidarity through social entrepreneurship. We are also present in about 30 countries. So it means that these subjects are becoming relevant the world around. You must have noticed 4 or 5 years ago that the invisible hand of the market, I hope we have bankers in the room, the invisible hand of the market that was supposed to take us to happiness actually placed us in a dead end, as you all know. And so I would really like to know how to open this bloody bottle. But anyway, I'll keep on trying to turn this cap around for the 6.26 minutes that I have left. Can somebody twist it for me? I don't have an earpiece, but if something could maybe send me the instructions to get this bottle open. Oh, thank you. I knew journalists could be useful. He manages a company with 11,000 employees, so of course he can't open a bottle. Thank you. Okay, so basically the idea was to say that this area is going to change. It's going to change worldwide because things are happening in the world of finance. In San Francisco, every year you've got the major bankers who get together to talk about impact investing. I think that you will also hear another presentation about finance in solidarity that is taking place in Paris. So these things are moving forward. And I'm sure that it can really change things and make a difference. There were a few specificities which I think were a problem. First, as I said, where the people come from. Self-educated, well, that's fine, that's fun, but it doesn't take you very far. Today, it's no longer the case. You have very educated people. Then you will have a legal framework as soon as the Parliament passes this law, drafted by Benoît Hamon. And then there is a real issue, a real topic, which is finance. So, finance should be addressed by the Public Investment Bank, the BPI. Oh, well, of course, people think that BPI, the Public Investment Bank, is going to solve all problems. Well, 500 million euros have been provisioned by that bank to help social economy to grow. So, of course, we don't need subsidies. That's for sure. That has to be made very clear. We need to work. We need public procurement. We need to be able to be in a position to win public markets, and then we would provide a service to the public. And then if it's an integration company, it would put people back on the job market, integrate them back into society, while doing I don't know what, but some kind of useful work for society. We need loans, and this is a real topic, because in an association you don't have shareholders, and so you can't just go to a bank and find money. So this public investment bank should be able to come in with what we call patient capital. That is, you lend the money, but you don't demand a 15% interest rate, even if it has to kill you. What banks usually do, including the banks that we are working with, which I'm not going to mention. So basically, we need a legal status that is in marching order. We need financing. We need also the capacity to overcome borders. 2 minutes, 58 seconds. Wow, that gets you running in 2 minutes and 58 seconds. What I want to tell you is that changing the economy, what does that mean? It means that you have to be able to look at three things at the same time: social impact, economic impact, and environmental impact. You need to keep an eye on those three, and you need to keep those three balanced at all times. A few years ago, we set up a capital development structure. It's called the Comptoir de l'Innovation SOS. So how does this work? Well, we support economies in the social economy industry who wants to grow and to become more professional, meaning that we invest between 500 and 2 million euros into companies, whatever legal status they have, association, cooperative, or even a commercial company. And so there's a committee which assesses the social impact of the project of the company in question. Like, is this going to make it possible to cure more people, to house more people, to bring drinking water to more people, whatever? And so we rate the social impact of that project. Then there's another committee that sits to assess the economic impact, because basically if you lend money to someone, you have to make sure that you will get the money back at some point. And then we present the project to our investors. Well, that's AXA and the other big companies, right? And we present them with projects in which we want to invest money. So the profitability is 4 to 5% for the investors. And of course, it's very safe for them, because if you look at the economy, you see that companies in the social economy actually resisted better than conventional economies. Well, that's probably because of their legal status. Because usually you're more clever when there's 5 of you than when there's just one. Because if one makes a mistake, well, then the other 4 will be able to react, or if he's got a good idea, the other 4 will boost him. Well, of course, not distributing dividends is also a factor, because a company that has a 13% profit and that distributes 15% to their shareholders, of course, is getting poorer. Especially since, in that case, this also has a negative impact on investment and research. And 15% dividends, sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not possible. But when you're the subsidiary of an American company, you have to distribute the 15%, or, in social economy, you don't have to have a 15% dividend distribution. So you can do 3%. And since you don't have to distribute it, you can keep it. And if there are bankers in the room, if you distribute 15 while you made only 13 every year, well, at the end of the cycle, you are less rich than if you only produce 3, but if you keep it. So our companies are more robust because they reinvest all their profit into development, into improving the service that they provide to their users, to their beneficiaries, and it's also better for their employees and for the environment. And I'm 16 seconds beyond my time, so I'm sorry, but I think I didn't do too bad, did I?
Non, non, juste. Je vais t'obliger à redépasser. Bon, d'abord, dans la coulisse, pour ceux que ça intéresse, moi je sais qui est la banque du.
Okay, I know which bank is the SOS Group's bank. For those of you who want to know, I don't know if you read UFIL, but you gave them an interview this summer that really is very much different from what NGOs in France would believe. They have a rule. That is to say, the smaller you are, the better the non-profit organization. Of course, you have 11,000 employees, so of course you're much bigger than average. And you're saying that in 10 years from now, there will be 10 times less non-profit organizations and they'll have 10 times as much power. So do you really believe this? Well, I do believe in this. This is not something that I said at the end of a meal. No, this is not a belief. It's something that I have been observing. It's a change of scale and the fact that our organizations are becoming more and more professional. We talked about those organizations which actually fight against exclusion, and we have to do with people who have more and more difficulties. Those of you who know what it takes to help people, we have 3,000 people that we host every night in Paris, and we have now more and more people coming that we didn't see before. You know, poor workers, for example, those who actually leave our premises in the morning to go to work. We have more and more young people, young girls who live on the streets as well. So we can see that the people we actually help are different from before. But in order to help them, we have less and less resources. For those of you who have a non-profit organization to manage, you know what I'm talking about. We have less and less resources. And also, we can say that we won't have those subsidies again. Let's face it. Let's not believe that they're going to come back. They're not. You know, some people say, you know, it's in spring, it will come back. Well, you know, spring came and no subsidy came. We changed our president, changed our government, and we still have no subsidy. So, you see, how important it is to stop increasing social expenses in this country and that subsidies are not going to come back. Or you may think, well, this is going to be replaced by economic activity. Clearly, if you want to distribute wealth, you first need to produce it. So let's, you know, roll up our sleeves and get down to work. Smallest organizations cost more. Because in a big organization, you can pool resources. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to be more resistant to weather the storms. And I'm sure that NGOs and, of course, I'm not talking about big NGOs. We're not talking about NGOs who actually help, you know, organize activities to go fishing. We're really talking about those people who act to help people socially from the health point of view. If we want to make sure that these people are still around in 10 years from now, I persist in saying that small is beautiful is stupid. Thank you.